The rain beat a relentless rhythm against the windows of apartment 303, a mournful drum against the red brick of the Portland building. Jack Wilson, 42, watched the droplets trace paths down the glass, a cup of cold coffee held between his hands. The wall clock read 3:17 a.m., but sleep had abandoned him long ago, specifically on October 15th, 1999. It had been exactly 2 years, 1 month, and 12 days since Emma, his 9-year-old daughter, had vanished without a trace. The morning had been like any other. A bowl of chocolate cereal, his little girl complaining about her missing science notebook, and his promise of a weekend movie. A kiss on the forehead and an "I love you, Dad," before Emma climbed onto the school bus. It was the last time Jack ever saw her. The apartment remained a near-perfect replica of that day. Emma's room, with its lavender walls and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, was untouched. Her stuffed animals were arranged on the bed, the Harry Potter books sat on her nightstand, and the half-finished science project she never got to present still occupied her desk. Jack hadn't had the heart to change a thing, as if altering the space might erase the last tangible evidence of his daughter's existence. "Mr. Wilson, you need to consider the possibility that Emma isn't coming back," Detective Ramirez had told him 6 months after the disappearance. "You need to move on with your life." But how do you move on when half your heart has been ripped out? For Jack, time had stopped that October. His life had become an obsession. Flyers bearing Emma's face on every telephone pole in the city, interviews on television programs, collaborations with missing children's organizations, and endless nights sifting through leads that always led to dead ends. He had sold his carpentry business, spent his life savings on private investigators, and even resorted to supposed psychics when the desperation became unbearable. The apartment was now cluttered with case files, maps marked with red pins indicating possible sightings, and an entire wall dedicated to the case's timeline. Jack knew every detail by heart. Emma had arrived at school and attended her first 3 classes. During recess, a classmate saw her talking to someone near the playground fence. After that, no one saw her again. The security cameras captured nothing unusual. There were no witnesses to an abduction, no signs of a struggle. Emma had simply vanished. As the months turned to years, the calls of support dwindled. Friends stopped visiting. Even Sarah, Emma's mother, who had left them when the girl was just 2, only appeared for the cameras during the first few weeks before returning to her new life in California. Jack had become a ghost, haunting the space between hope and despair. The phone rang less and less. The detectives spaced out their visits. The world kept spinning while Jack remained stuck on that October day. "I'm sure she's still alive," he would murmur, taping another poster to a pole, this one with a digitally aged progression of what Emma might look like now. "I would feel it if she were gone. A father would know." On this particular November night in 2001, the storm was especially fierce. Jack was reviewing the statements from Emma's classmates for the 100th time when he heard something he hadn't heard in a long, long time. The doorbell. It was 10:43 p.m. Jack peered through the peephole, but the hallway was too dark to make out anything clearly. He opened the door on its chain, prepared to turn away a well-meaning neighbor or, worse, another journalist looking for an anniversary update on the missing girl's case. What he saw on the other side made his knees buckle. 2 identical girls, about 11 years old, stood on his doorstep. Their reddish-blonde hair was tied in pigtails, their noses dusted with freckles. They stared up at him with unmistakable green eyes. The same constellation of freckles he had counted 1,000 times as Emma slept. The same tiny mole beneath the right eye. Duplicated. "Daddy!" they said in unison, in a voice he had only heard in his dreams for 2 years. Jack clung to the doorframe, unable to breathe. The girls wore yellow raincoats soaked from the storm. They were identical down to the last detail, as if someone had crafted a perfect mirror. Emma, he finally managed to articulate, his voice breaking. "It's me, Dad," said the girl on the right, taking a step forward. "I'm home." "No, Dad," the one on the left cut in with equal conviction. "She's lying. I'm Emma. Don't you recognize your own daughter?" Jack Wilson felt the world stop for the second time in his life as he stared at them. Completely identical, completely impossible. "Let's go home, Starfish," they both said at once, using the nickname Jack had invented when Emma was 4, mesmerized by the starfish at the aquarium. A flash of lightning illuminated the hallway, revealing for an instant the expressions on both girls' faces, a perfect blend of hope and something darker that Jack couldn't identify. He stood frozen in the doorway, his mind unable to process what his eyes were seeing. Two identical versions of Emma, down to the small scar on her chin and the asymmetrical way she smiled. "Come in," he finally murmured, stepping aside to let them pass. The girls slipped into the apartment, their shoes leaving wet tracks on the hardwood floor. Jack closed the door, leaning against it as if he feared the moment might escape if he didn't. He watched as they took in the living room, their expressions a perfect mirror of recognition and nostalgia. "You haven't changed a thing," said the girl on the right, whom Jack mentally labeled Emma 1. "The science project," murmured Emma 2, walking toward the table where the model of the solar system still sat. "I never got to finish it." A chill ran down Jack's spine. They both moved like Emma, spoke like Emma, knew things only Emma could know. It was like being trapped in a surreal nightmare, or perhaps the very dream he had been waiting for 2 years. "Who are you?" he finally asked, his question directed at both of them and neither of them. "I'm Emma, Dad," Emma 1 replied, her eyes welling with pain. "I know this is confusing, but it's me. She's the imposter." "Don't believe her," Emma 2 pleaded, her own voice cracking. "I'm your daughter, the real Emma." Jack ran a hand over his face, trying to hold himself together. For 2 years he had dreamed of this moment, but he had never imagined a scenario like this. "Where have you been?" he asked, addressing them both. The girls exchanged a tense glance before Emma 1 answered. "They took me, Dad. A man and a woman. They said they were my biological parents, that you had stolen me when I was a baby." Emma 2 let out a bitter laugh. "That's a lie. They took me to a place in the mountains, some kind of laboratory. They did experiments." Jack felt the room begin to spin. Neither story made any sense, yet both girls spoke with such conviction that it was impossible to detect any deceit. "How did you escape? How did you find me?" he pressed, searching for an inconsistency, anything that would reveal the truth. "I waited for 2 years, watching, planning," said Emma 1. "When they let their guard down, I took some money and ran. I always knew our address." "I looked for you in the news," Emma 2 explained. "I saw you were still living here, waiting for me. I managed to escape when they were moving some of us." "Us?" Jack asked. Emma 2 looked down. "The other children. There were more." Silence fell over the room, broken only by the drumming of the rain. Jack studied the girls, searching for a sign, anything that would tell him which one, if either, was really his daughter. "Prove it," he said finally. "Tell me something only Emma would know." Both girls straightened up, as if they had been waiting for the challenge. "The night before I disappeared," Emma 1 began, "you told me the story of how you met Mom in the university library when you spilled coffee on her book of Sylvia Plath poetry." Jack nodded slowly. It was true. "And afterward," Emma 2 continued, "I asked if you still loved her. You said that some people are only meant to be in our lives for a little while, but that you didn't regret it because without her, you wouldn't have me. That was also true. A lump formed in Jack's throat. My first day of school, said Emma 1. I cried because I didn't want to leave you. You gave me your old pocket watch, Grandpa's watch, and said that every time I looked at it, I would know exactly how long until I was home with you again. And I hid it in my pink backpack. Emma 2 added, the one with the star patches. I carried it with me every single day. Jack sank heavily onto the sofa. The watch had vanished along with Emma. A meaningless material loss compared to the void she left, but significant now that they both remembered it. Where is the watch now? He asked, hoping for a crack in their stories. The two girls looked at each other, and for the first time Jack saw a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. They took it from me, Emma 1 answered after a brief pause. I lost it when I was escaping, Emma 2 said almost simultaneously. A new silence, heavier than the last. Jack stared at their identical faces, trying to find anything that would help him distinguish the truth. If one of them was Emma, who was the other? And what if neither of them was? Or if somehow, impossibly, they both were? I need to call the police, he said finally, standing up. No! They both cried in unison, fear stark in their voices. Dad, you can't, pleaded Emma 1. If you do, they'll take me back. They'll find us, added Emma 2. The lab, they have contacts everywhere, police, hospitals, social services. Jack stopped, his hand halfway to the phone. Paranoia wasn't like Emma, but after 2 years in captivity, who could blame her? If either of them was his daughter, he couldn't risk losing her again. I at least need help, he insisted. I can't handle this alone. You could call Uncle Robert, Emma 1 suggested, referring to Jack's best friend, the only one who had never stopped checking in on him. He'll understand. He always said you'd find me, Emma 2 added with a shy smile. Jack nodded slowly. Robert was a doctor. He could help. Maybe he could even run some kind of test. As he dialed the number, he watched the two Emmas move around the apartment. Emma 1 went straight to the bookshelf, instinctively selecting the worn copy of The Little Prince that had been his daughter's favorite. Emma 2, meanwhile, walked to the upright piano in the corner, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them, exactly as Emma used to do. Jack, Robert's sleepy voice came over the line. Do you know what time it is? I need you to come over, Jack said, his eyes fixed on the girls. Right now, and don't tell anyone. What's going on? Are you okay? Emma's back, Jack said, the next words feeling surreal on his own tongue. Both of them. The silence on the other end was brief but heavy. I'm on my way, Robert finally said, asking no more questions. While they waited, Jack made hot chocolate, Emma's favorite, with extra marshmallows, and watched as both girls held their mugs in the exact same way with both hands, blowing gently before each sip. Are you hungry? He asked, trying to maintain a normal tone, as if having two identical versions of his missing daughter in his living room was the most natural thing in the world. They both nodded, and Jack retreated to the kitchen, needing a moment alone. As he opened the refrigerator, he heard a whisper from the living room. Unable to resist, he crept silently to the half-open door. The two Emmas were standing face to face, staring at each other with an unsettling intensity. You know this won't work, one of them whispered, her voice so low Jack could barely hear it. He has to choose, the other replied, and he'll choose me. Neither of us should be here, the first one countered, but only one of us can stay. Jack held his breath, a cold dread creeping up his spine. Before he could process what he'd heard, the doorbell rang, announcing Robert's arrival and shattering the moment. The girls instantly separated as if the whispered secrets had never happened. leaving Jack to wonder what in God's name was truly happening in his apartment on this stormy night. Robert Miller stood frozen in the doorway, his pale face a stark contrast to his rain-soaked black coat. His eyes darted from one girl to the other in disbelief. "My God, Jack," he finally murmured, stepping inside without taking his eyes off the twins. "Uncle Robert," they said in unison with identical knowing smiles. Jack closed the door and led his friend toward the kitchen, leaving the girls in the living room. "They showed up an hour ago," he explained in a low voice. "Both of them claimed to be Emma. They know details only she could know, things that were never made public." Robert, still stunned, shrugged off his coat. "Prohibited content. If there's a secret government project experimenting on children, that's a scandal of national proportions." "And what if it's not the government?" Jack countered. "What if it's something worse? Dr. Vasquez said they have transmitters. The moment we contact the authorities, whoever is behind this will know exactly where they are." "We can't handle this alone, Jack," Robert insisted. Before they could argue further, a noise from the living room drew their attention. Rushing back, they found Emma too, holding a small metallic object between her fingers. "I found it behind my ear," she explained, showing them what looked like a minuscule electronic chip. "I felt something strange when I was combing my hair." Jack approached cautiously. "Does it hurt?" Emma too shook her head. "It bled a little, but it's stopped now." Robert examined both the chip and the small wound. "It looks like she managed to pull it out herself. The incision is minimal." "Can I see?" Emma one asked, drawing closer. Jack watched as she discreetly felt behind her own ear, searching for a similar lump. "Don't touch it," Robert warned. "If you have one too, it could be dangerous to remove it without the proper equipment." The sudden ring of a phone made them all jump. Jack glanced at the caller ID. Unknown number. "Don't answer it," Emma too pleaded, panic rising in her voice. "It's him, the doctor. He knows I took the chip out." Jack hesitated, his hand hovering over the phone. Finally, on the fourth ring, he answered. "Mr. Wilson," a cold, precise male voice said, "I'm pleased to finally speak with you. I see you've gathered our family together." "Who is this?" Jack demanded, gesturing for Robert to shield the girls. "Someone interested in recovering government property," the voice replied. "The girls in your apartment are the property of Project Mirror." "They're human beings, not property," Jack spat, anger flaring inside him. "They are products of advanced bioengineering, Mr. Wilson, and one of them has just damaged a very expensive tracking device. We have a team en route to your location. I suggest you don't complicate things." "What did you do to my daughter?" Jack asked, his voice cracking. "Where is the real Emma?" There was a short silence on the other end of the line. "That is a fascinating question, Mr. Wilson. Which is the real Emma? The one who existed before or the ones who exist now? Philosophy aside, you have 20 minutes to hand over the subjects, or you will face consequences you would prefer to avoid." The line went dead. Jack looked at Robert, panic tightening in his chest. "We have to go, now!" Wasting no time, Jack gathered a few important documents and some cash while Robert helped the girls into their coats. In less than 5 minutes, they were in Robert's car, speeding away from the building. "Where are we going, Dad?" Emma one asked, her voice small and afraid. Jack glanced in the rearview mirror at the two identical versions of his daughter. In that moment, it didn't matter which one was real. They were both frightened children who needed his protection. "To a safe place," he answered, wishing he felt as confident as he tried to sound. "Far away from the people who want to hurt you." As the car sped into the night, Jack knew they were crossing a point of no return. The search for his missing daughter had become something far more complex and dangerous. And the truth, whatever it was, promised to be more disturbing than he could have ever imagined. Robert's cabin on Oswego Lake, an hour outside of Portland, emerged from the trees like a beacon in the darkness. Isolated at the end of a dirt road, it was the perfect refuge: no close neighbors, no security cameras, and most importantly, no recent records in Jack Wilson's name. "No one's been here in months," Robert explained as he unlocked the door and flipped on the lights. The interior smelled of wood and damp earth, but it was clean and well-maintained. "The generator has enough fuel for a week, and there's a cellar with emergency supplies." Jack nodded distractedly, his mind on the girls. The Emmas explored the space with identical curiosity, their movements synchronized in a strange choreographed dance. "There are 2 bedrooms upstairs," Robert continued. "They can use the main one. It has 2 beds. "I'd rather they sleep separately," Jack replied in a low voice. "I don't trust what they might do if they're alone." The memory of their earlier fight was still fresh, the unexpected violence with which Emma 1 had attacked her double. Robert nodded in understanding. While the girls settled in, the 2 men spoke in hushed tones in the kitchen. "We need a plan," Robert said, brewing coffee. "We can't hide forever." Jack rubbed his tired eyes. That man on the phone, he knew exactly where we were. If Emma 2 hadn't found that transmitter— "But Emma 1 still has hers," Robert pointed out. "If they can track her—" "I thought of that," Jack interrupted. "Before we left the apartment, I slipped her chip into the pocket of a homeless man who sleeps near the building. With any luck, that will keep them confused for a while." Robert raised his eyebrows, impressed. "Quick thinking, but they'll figure out the deception eventually. We just need time to understand what's happening and how to protect them." Their conversation was cut short by Emma 1, who appeared silently in the kitchen doorway. "Dad," she called softly, "can I talk to you? Alone?" Jack exchanged a look with Robert before nodding. He followed the girl out to the back porch, which overlooked the lake, now invisible in the darkness save for the faint reflection of the moon on the water. "What's wrong, honey?" he asked, sitting beside her on the wooden steps. Emma 1 was quiet for a moment, as if gathering her courage. "I need to tell you something," she finally began. "About her. The other me." Jack held his breath, waiting for the revelation. "It's not safe to be near her," the girl continued. "She's not what she seems. At the lab, they made her different. Dangerous." "What do you mean, different?" Jack asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. Emma 1 hugged herself, shivering slightly despite the mild night. "Sometimes when she thinks no one is watching, she does things that aren't normal." "What kind of things?" "I saw her move objects without touching them," she whispered. "And once, when one of the guards hurt her, he had an accident the next day. Everyone knew it was her, but nobody said anything." Jack processed the information, unsure what to believe. It could be a tactic to discredit her rival, or there could be some truth to it. Project Mirror clearly involved advanced technology. Genetic manipulation could, in theory, include enhanced abilities. "Why are you telling me this now?" he finally asked. "Because I'm scared," Emma 1 admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "She doesn't want to share you. She wants to be the only Emma." Before Jack could respond, the door creaked open behind them. Emma 2 stood watching them, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Robert says dinner is ready," she announced in a flat voice before disappearing back inside. Dinner was a tense, silent affair, broken only by the clinking of silverware and occasional comments about the food. Jack watched the girls, noting how they avoided looking at each other, how Emma 1 checked her food before each bite, how Emma 2 kept one hand under the table as if gripping something. After they ate, Robert suggested they all get some rest. The next day would require clear heads to decide their next steps. Jack settled Emma 1 in the main bedroom, while Emma 2 took the small guest room. He would sleep on the sofa, strategically positioned between both rooms. In the middle of the night, a creak on the floorboards woke him. Jack opened his eyes to find Emma 2 standing by the sofa, watching him in the dark. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting up quickly. "I can't sleep," the girl replied. "I'm scared." "Come here," Jack said, making room for her on the couch. Emma 2 curled up against him, her small body trembling slightly. "She lied to you, didn't she?" she murmured after a moment. "About me." Jack tensed. "What makes you think that?" "I saw her talking to you on the porch. I know what she does. She makes up stories so people will distrust me." "And why would she do that?" Jack asked, aware he was caught in a dangerous game between two versions of his daughter. "Because only one of us can stay," Emma 2 replied with an unsettling certainty. "It's what they always told us at the lab. Only the most perfect mirror will survive." A chill ran down Jack's spine. "What does that mean?" Emma 2 was silent for a moment. "The doctor said we were mirrors, reflections created to test something, a theory about duplicating consciousness." "Consciousness? You mean a soul?" Jack asked, struggling to understand. "I don't know," the girl admitted. "They talked about transferring something invisible from one person to another. They said if it worked, they could make perfect copies, not just of the body, but of everything that makes someone who they are." The implications were terrifying. Jack remembered the man's words on the phone. "Which is the real Emma?" "Do you remember anything before the lab?" he asked gently. "Before the 2 years you were there?" Emma 2 nodded against his chest. "I remember everything, Dad. Our house on Riverside before we moved to the apartment. My 7th birthday when you gave me that purple bike. The time we got lost driving to Grandma's house and ended up eating ice cream at midnight at that truck stop." Every memory was precise, authentic. Moments Jack hadn't shared with anyone. Private experiences between him and his daughter. "If you both have the same memories," Jack began but couldn't finish the sentence. "That's why only one can stay," Emma 2 completed for him. "Because there can't be two people with the same life, the same memories, the same—" "The same what?" Jack pressed when she trailed off. "The same me," she finally answered. "The doctor said it was impossible to split a me into two places." Their conversation was cut short by a sound from outside. Jack tensed, instinctively pulling the girl closer. "What was that?" Emma 2 whispered. Jack rose cautiously and moved to the window. The forest was almost pitch black, but he thought he saw movement among the trees. It could be an animal or something far more sinister. "Go wake up Robert," he instructed in a low voice. "Don't make a sound." As Emma 2 crept upstairs, Jack searched the kitchen for anything that could serve as a weapon, settling on a hunting knife Robert kept in a drawer. Moments later, Robert came down with Emma 2, followed by Emma 1, who had woken with the commotion. "I saw lights," Robert murmured, peering out another window. "Down at the end of the drive." "They found us," Jack said, his heart pounding. "The cellar," Robert said immediately. "There's an emergency exit that leads to the boat dock. There's a boat." He led the group to a hidden door under a rug in the living room. The cellar was cold and smelled of damp earth, but Robert knew the way even in the dark. "The exit is behind those shelves," he explained, moving a heavy shelving unit to reveal a low, narrow tunnel. "It's a tight squeeze, but it'll take us right to the lake." Jack had the girls go first, followed by Robert. He would be last, making sure the shelf was moved back into place to hide their escape. The tunnel was narrow and suffocating, forcing them to crawl on their hands and knees. Jack could feel the weight of the earth above them, hear the ragged breathing of the girls ahead. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small hatch which Robert pried open. They emerged onto a small covered dock where a rowboat waited, bobbing gently on the lake's surface. Robert worked quickly to ready it while Jack watched the path they had come from. "Dad!" Emma one called, her voice barely a whisper. "I hear something." Jack heard it too. Voices and the snap of breaking twigs. They were closing in on the cabin. "Hurry!" he urged Robert. "We don't have much time." The girls scrambled into the boat, followed by Robert. Jack was about to join them when a metallic clang echoed from the tunnel. Someone had found the entrance in the cellar. "Go!" Jack whispered urgently, shoving the boat away from the dock. "No!" both Emmas cried in unison, reaching for him. "I'll meet you through the woods," Jack promised. "Robert, take them to the east shore. We'll meet at the point we talked about." Robert nodded grimly, understanding the reference to a contingency plan they had briefly discussed. He began to row, pulling away into the darkness as Jack melted into the forest, running parallel to the shore, hoping to draw their pursuers away. The last thing he saw was the faces of the two Emmas, identical in their pain and fear, watching him disappear among the trees. In that moment, it didn't matter which was the real Emma. They were both real in their suffering, in their need for protection, and Jack was determined to save them both, no matter the cost. He moved through the trees with an agility born of desperation. Every snap of a twig under his feet sounded like a gunshot in the forest's silence. Behind him, male voices and the sweeping beams of flashlights told him his pursuers had found the tunnel and were now on his trail. "South Division, spread out! Move out!" an authoritative voice commanded. "2 units to the lake, the rest with me. Primary objective is to secure the subjects." Jack quickened his pace, moving away from the lake shore. He had to draw them off, to keep them from discovering the direction Robert and the girls had taken. If he could just keep these men occupied long enough, they might have a chance. Nearly an hour into the chase, he finally found cover in a dense thicket of bushes. The voices and flashlight beams had scattered, but Jack knew they were still out there, methodically sweeping the area. They were well-trained, military or maybe government contractors. Special ops. As dawn began to bleed gray into the sky, Jack used the growing light to get his bearings. The rendezvous point he'd given Robert was an old, abandoned ranger station about 5 miles to the east. He would have to move with extreme caution to reach it undetected. Meanwhile, on the far side of the lake, Robert had guided the boat into a small rocky cove, concealed by fallen trees. The girls remained unusually silent, their identical faces etched with the same fear. "Is Dad going to be okay?" Emma finally asked, her voice barely a whisper above the gentle lapping of the water. "Jack is smart. He knows these woods," Robert answered with more confidence than he felt. "He won't make it to the station. If they catch him, it'll be my fault," Emma too murmured, hugging her arms to her chest. "Don't say that," Robert replied automatically, though he couldn't help but wonder if she was right. Was the presence of these girls, whoever, whatever they were, the reason Jack was now in danger? He guided the Emmas onto a path barely visible through the undergrowth. The ranger station was about 3 miles from here. It would take them at least 2 hours, moving cautiously and staying off the main trails. As they walked in sync, Robert watched the girls. Medically identical, behaviorally indistinguishable, and yet there were moments when he perceived subtle differences. Emma seemed more decisive, her gaze constantly scanning their surroundings, while Emma, too, was more withdrawn, often lost in thought. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally, taking advantage of a brief rest by a stream. "What's the last thing you remember, before you were separated?" The girls exchanged a quick glance, something he rarely saw them do. The playground, I answered. I was on the swing set, and a woman came up to the fence. She said she was a friend of Dad's, that he'd been in an accident, and I needed to go with her to the hospital. I remember the same thing, Emma Tatu added. But when I went out the side gate to meet her, a man put something over my mouth. It smelled sweet, and then everything went dark. Robert frowned. You both remember the exact same moment, but with different endings. The girls nodded. It's like we were the same person right up until that second, Emma too explained, and then suddenly we were two. The point of divergence, Robert murmured, more to himself than to them. If what they were saying was true, it supported an impossible theory, that somehow the single consciousness of Emma Wilson had bifurcated into two physically separate but mentally continuous entities. The doctor called it the mirror moment, Emma, I said, confirming Robert's thoughts. He said it was the first successful experiment in consciousness duplication. A sudden crackle in the nearby bushes shattered the conversation. Robert tensed, instinctively moving between the girls and the sound. To his relief, it was only a deer which darted away through the trees as soon as it saw them. We need to keep moving, he urged, aware they had stayed in one place for too long. Meanwhile, Jack had managed to elude his pursuers and was now making steady, cautious progress toward the ranger station. The forest, once a sanctuary for weekend camping trips with Emma, now felt hostile and threatening. Every sound could be an innocent animal or an armed man hunting him. Halfway to his destination, he found a clearing with a flicker of cell service. He'd kept his phone off to avoid being tracked, but now he needed help. He powered it on just long enough to send an encrypted message to a contact he had hoped never to involve. Catherine Reed, an old college friend who was now an investigative journalist specializing in government conspiracies. K emergency, Project Mirror, make noise, pick up coordinates, 45.3621, 122.1036, tomorrow 10 a.m. He shut the phone down immediately, then pulled out the battery and SIM card, scattering the pieces in different directions. It was a risk, but they needed allies. Catherine had the contacts and the influence to get a story like this onto the national stage. Public exposure might be their only protection. By the time Jack reached the ranger station, the sun was high in the sky. The derelict building, a single-story wooden structure with boarded-up windows, appeared deserted. He approached with extreme caution, scanning for any sign that Robert and the girls had made it. A low whistle sounded from inside. 3 ascending notes, a pause, then 2 descending. It was the signal they'd agreed on years ago, during their fishing trips. Jack whistled the same pattern in reply before slipping inside. The interior was dusty and derelict, littered with broken furniture and scattered papers. Robert emerged from a back room, his face flooded with relief at the sight of Jack, unharmed. "Thank God," he murmured, pulling his friend into a brief, tight hug. "The girls are resting. They were exhausted." "Are they okay?" Jack asked, his eyes immediately going to the room where the Emmas lay, curled together on an old mattress, their identical faces peaceful for the first time since they'd appeared. "Physically, yes," Robert answered in a low voice. "Emotionally, it's complicated, Jack. We talked on the way here. What they're saying is incredible, but it's consistent." Jack pulled away from the doorway, leading Robert back into the main room. "What did they tell you?" "According to them, they're both Emma, the same memories right up until the moment of the abduction. After that, their experiences diverge." "How is that even possible?" Jack asked, though he already suspected the answer. "I don't know for sure," Robert admitted, "but based on what Dr. Vasquez described about Project Mirror, it seems they've achieved something once thought to be theoretically impossible. They didn't just duplicate a body, they duplicated consciousness, memories, personality. Jack sank into a rickety chair, the weight of the revelation crushing him. Are you saying they're both really my daughter? I'm saying that from a scientific and philosophical standpoint, there's no way to determine which one is the original, if that distinction even has any meaning in this context. Jack remembered the man on the phone. Which is the real Emma? The one that was, or the ones that are? Why would they do something like this? He murmured, more to himself than to Robert. Think of the applications, his friend replied. Consciousness duplication means consciousness transfer, potential immortality, the creation of perfect soldiers with implanted memories and skills. The implications are monstrous, Jack finished. A sound from the other room alerted them. Emma. I stood in the doorway, her red-rimmed eyes telling them she'd been listening. We're not monsters, she said, her voice trembling. No, sweetheart, I didn't mean you, Jack said quickly, moving to embrace her. Dimiti, I meant the people who did this, the people who hurt you. Emma, I allowed the hug, but her body remained stiff. The doctor said we were miracles, the future, but he said only one of the mirrors could be perfect, the others were disposable. A chill ran down Jack's spine. What do you mean, disposable? There were others before us, Emma, I explained, her voice suddenly mechanical, as if reciting something she'd memorized. Other duplicates, but they failed the tests. They didn't have memory consistency, or they developed divergent personalities, or their bodies rejected the implants. And what happened to them? Robert asked gently. Emma, I lowered her gaze. They disappeared. A soft sob from the doorway revealed that Emma the Two was also awake and had heard everything. That's why we ran, she added, because we knew that eventually one of us would have to disappear. The air left Jack's lungs. The thought of these girls, both of them carrying the memories, the personality, the very essence of his daughter, living under such a threat was unbearable. No one is going to disappear, he declared, his voice firm. I will protect you both. How? Emma, I asked, her voice laced with doubt. They're looking for us. They have resources, technology. The doctor said no one can hide from them forever. Jack thought of the message he'd sent. I have a plan. A friend, a journalist, is going to help us. If we make this story public, if the world finds out what they've been doing, you think that will stop them? Emma too cut in, her tone surprisingly cynical for an 11-year-old. Project Mirror is too valuable. They'll just deny everything, or they'll justify it as essential research for national security. Jack and Robert exchanged a worried glance. The girl had a point. Then we need irrefutable evidence, Robert said finally. Something they can't deny or bury. The implant, Jack suggested. The one Emma too took out. I threw it in the lake, the girl admitted. I was afraid they could track us with it. There's something else, Emma, I interjected, hesitating for a moment before she continued. Something the doctor valued more than the implants, more than any other part of the experiment. What is it? Jack asked. His notes, his research journal. He kept it with him always, but I know where he keeps it. Emma too stared at her counterpart, surprised. How do you know that? Because I saw him one day when I was pretending to be sedated during an exam. He keeps it in a safe behind a painting in his office. I memorized the combination. It was my birthday. Jack and Robert shared a look of renewed hope. If they could get that journal, they would have the proof they needed to expose the entire project. But how would we get there? Robert asked. We don't know where the lab is. I do, Emma, I said. It's on Mount Hood, disguised as a weather research center. I can guide you. It's too dangerous, Jack protested. I'm not putting you at risk again. It's our only chance, I insisted. Without those notes, no one will believe us and they'll hunt us forever. Silence fell over the room as Jack weighed her words. She was right, but the thought of taking her back to the place she'd been held captive, been experimented on, was unbearable. I'll go, he decided finally. You'll tell me where it is and how to get in, but you will stay here with Robert somewhere safe. It won't work, Emma too cut in. The lab has biometric scanners, only we can get in. Us. Jack looked at the two versions of his daughter, trapped in a scientific nightmare he was only beginning to comprehend, and knew the true test of his love as a father was about to begin. The mountain loomed under the night sky, its pine-covered slopes swaying in the cold November wind. The black sedan Robert had borrowed from a colleague crept along the forest road, its headlights cutting only a few feet into the dense darkness ahead. GPS says we're about a mile out, Robert reported, navigating the rough terrain with care. In the back seat, Jack sat between the two Emmas, each staring out her respective window. The plan they had pieced together over the last 24 hours was risky, possibly suicidal, but it felt like their only viable option. Remember, Jack said for the 10th time, if anything goes wrong, the fallback is the ranger station. Catherine will be waiting there at 10 tomorrow morning. She can protect you and get the story out, even if we... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. You should stop here, I directed, pointing to an area where the trees grew thicker. There are cameras on the last half-mile of the road. Robert killed the engine and the lights. The silence of the forest enveloped them, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl and the creak of branches in the wind. Let's go over the plan one more time, Jack said, pulling a small pack from the trunk. The girls nodded solemnly, their identical expressions of determination making Jack's heart ache. They were too young to carry a burden like this, yet here they were, ready to risk everything. Emma and I will approach from the east side where the service entrance is, Jack began. We'll use her biometric access to get inside. Once we're in, we go straight for the doctor's office to retrieve the journal. Meanwhile, Robert continued, Emma, this too, and I will keep watch from the southern perimeter. If we see any unusual activity or reinforcements arriving, we give the signal to abort immediately. 3 flashes from the flashlight, Emma Tutu recited, and we all head for the extraction point. Jack nodded, giving each girl's shoulder a gentle squeeze. This isn't about being heroes. If things get complicated, we run. The priority is getting out of here alive. All of us. And if one of us gets caught? I asked, voicing the question they had all been avoiding. No one gets left behind, Jack answered firmly. But if the unthinkable happens and we can't regroup, you each know what to do. Get to Catherine, with whatever proof you have. They divided the gear, short-range communicators, small flashlights fitted with red filters to minimize their visibility, and a digital storage device to copy any information they found. Besides the journal. 15 minutes to sync watches, Robert announced, adjusting his digital timepiece. We move at 0200. Jack used these last few minutes to embrace each of the girls. Emma the Xin, who would remain with Robert, clung to him with an unusual strength. Come back, Dad, she whispered against his chest. Promise me. I promise, Starfish, he replied automatically, using the old nickname that meant so much to both of them. At 0200 sharp, the two teams separated, melting into the forest along different routes. Jack and Emma. I advanced in silence, the girl moving with an assurance that spoke of her familiarity with the terrain. After a 20-minute walk, they reached a clearing where a modern structure of concrete and glass rose from the earth. The Cascade Meteorological Research Center, MORI murmured. At least, that's what the sign says. Jack studied the building through night vision binoculars. The facility appeared modest. A main two-story building with a smaller annex and several antennas and weather instruments scattered around the perimeter. To any casual observer, it would indeed look like a legitimate scientific station. "How many guards?" he asked in a low voice. "Two at the main entrance, one at the service door, and an internal security team of at least 4. I answered with clinical precision. "But at this hour, most of the scientific staff is gone. Only a skeleton crew will be left." "And the doctor?" Emma. I shook her head. "He doesn't sleep here. He has a house in government camp. He comes in the mornings." That was an advantage they had counted on. Without the doctor on site, their chances of accessing his office undetected were significantly better. They crept silently to the east side of the complex, where an unmarked metal door served as a service entrance. As I had predicted, a single guard stood watch, occasionally taking a drag from a cigarette and scrolling through his phone with obvious boredom. Jack and Emma waited patiently, concealed in the bushes, until the guard received a radio call and stepped momentarily away from his post to answer. "Now," Jack whispered, and they both darted toward the door. Next to the entrance was a biometric scanner discreetly integrated into the wall. I placed her hand on it, holding her breath. For one endless second, nothing happened, and Jack feared they had changed the security protocols. But then a green light blinked and the door emitted a soft click as it unlocked. They slipped inside just as the guard returned to his post, apparently having noticed nothing unusual. The interior was surprisingly austere. Stark white corridors, dimly lit by emergency lights, were lined with numbered doors that gave no clue as to their purpose. An unsettling silence was broken only by the low hum of ventilation systems. "The doctor's office is on the second floor," I whispered, leading Jack toward a service staircase. They moved cautiously down the main hallway, pausing at every corner to check for personnel. At one point, they had to duck hastily into a supply closet as 2 technicians walked past, conversing in low tones about equipment calibrations. The second floor had a visibly higher level of security. Cameras mounted on the ceiling, card readers on every door, and a security desk in the center of the main corridor. Fortunately, the guards seemed to be momentarily absent. "This way!" I beckoned, guiding Jack down a secondary hallway. "There's another way." She led them through a labyrinth of maintenance corridors to a section that seemed less monitored. At the end of a narrow passage, a dark wooden door stood in stark contrast to the metal ones that dominated the rest of the facility. "This is it," I confirmed, her voice barely audible. "The doctor's office." Unlike the other doors, this one had a traditional lock in addition to a retinal scanner. I pulled a small case from her pocket, one she had taken from Robert's cabin. It contained a basic set of lockpicks, a hobby Robert had cultivated in his youth, which now proved providential. "Can you handle it?" the girl asked. Jack nodded, taking the tools with slightly trembling hands. During his desperate search for Emma, he had learned several unconventional skills, including basic lockpicking. After several tense minutes, the lock yielded with a soft click. The retinal scanner, however, remained an insurmountable obstacle. "Let me try," I said, standing on her tiptoes to reach the device. "Wait," Jack whispered, holding her by the shoulder. "What if it triggers an alarm? Your biometric access might be limited to certain areas." I hesitated. "You're right, but I remember something." She carefully examined the doorframe until she found a small, concealed panel. She pried it open to reveal a numeric keypad. "It's an emergency override system," she explained. "The doctor used it when the scanner failed." Jack held his breath as MOI entered a sequence of numbers. 09151990. Emma's date of birth. To his relief, a green light illuminated and the door unlocked with a soft whir. The doctor's office was spacious and surprisingly traditional. Wooden bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, a large desk with a state-of-the-art computer and several framed paintings of mountain landscapes. Nothing in the room suggested the horrors this man had perpetrated in the name of science. "The painting," I said, pointing to a particularly large canvas of Mount Hood hanging behind the desk. Jack carefully lifted it from the wall to reveal a digital safe embedded in the concrete. Once again, I entered her birth date, and the safe opened without resistance. Inside were several documents, an external hard drive, and a black leather-bound book with the initials AM embossed on the cover. "This is it," I confirmed, taking the book with a mixture of reverence and fear. "The doctor's journal." Jack stowed the journal in his backpack along with the hard drive, which could contain valuable additional information. Meanwhile, Emma quickly scanned the documents. "They're progress reports," she murmured, flicking through the pages. "On us, and on others." Jack glanced at the papers and felt his blood run cold. There were photographs of children, some as young as 5 or 6, with identification numbers and clinical annotations. Many had the word "discarded" stamped in red across their images. "We have to take them all," he decided, stuffing the documents into his pack. The communicator on his wrist vibrated faintly. It was Robert's prearranged signal. "All clear on the perimeter." "Let's go," Jack urged. "We have what we came for." They were about to leave when I stopped, her gaze fixed on the doctor's computer. "Wait," she said. "There could be more information on there." "It's too risky," Jack warned. "We don't know if it's monitored." "I know his password," I insisted. "I saw him type it once. It'll only take a minute." Before Jack could stop her, the girl was already seated at the computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The screen came to life, displaying a desktop meticulously organized into labeled folders. "Project Mirror," I read aloud, opening one of them. "His Project Kaleidoscope. Phase 3. Implementation." Jack moved closer, his curiosity momentarily overcoming his caution. The folder contained dozens of cryptically named files, but one stood out. "Active subjects, locations." "Emma." I opened it, revealing a map dotted with points across the United States. "It's the others," she whispered, horrified. "The ones who passed the tests. They're everywhere." Jack quickly connected the storage device and began copying every file he could. The implication was clear and terrifying. Project Mirror wasn't limited to Emma. There were more children, more duplicates, scattered across the country. The communicator vibrated again, this time in a different pattern. 3 short pulses, the alarm signal. "We have to go. Now," Jack urged, yanking the device out even though the transfer hadn't finished. They hurried out of the office, making sure to close the door behind them. Jack checked his watch. They had been inside for nearly 25 minutes. Longer than planned. They headed for the escape route they had memorized, but as they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a security guard who looked as surprised as they were. "Hey, stop right there!" the man exclaimed, his hand dropping to the weapon on his belt. Jack reacted instinctively, shoving Emma behind him as he sized up his options. The hallway was narrow, with no room to dodge or hide. "Run," he whispered to Emma. "Find Robert and Emma. Take this to them." He quickly thrust the backpack with the documents into her small hands. "I'm not leaving you," the girl protested, grabbing his arm. "Trust me," Jack insisted, his gaze locked on the cautiously advancing guard. "I'll catch up." With tears in her eyes, Emma I nodded and slipped away down a side corridor as Jack advanced toward the guard, his hands raised in apparent surrender. "I'm just a father looking for answers," he said, trying to buy time for Emma I to escape. The guard hesitated, momentarily confused by the strange declaration. That split second of hesitation was all Jack needed. He lunged forward, tackling the man against the wall. A brief, intense struggle followed, and then a sharp pain exploded in Jack's temple as the butt of the guard's weapon slammed into his head. The last thing he saw before darkness consumed him was the guard's alarmed face and the distant sound of an alarm beginning to blare. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into Jack's wrists when he finally regained consciousness. He was sitting in an uncomfortable chair inside what appeared to be an interrogation room. Bare white walls, a stainless steel table, and a one-way mirror that took up nearly an entire wall. His head throbbed where he'd been hit. The door opened with a hydraulic hiss and a man entered. He was tall, thin, with perfectly coiffed gray hair and fine-rimmed glasses. He wore a pristine lab coat over a dark suit, and his pale, angular face seemed incapable of emotion. "Mr. Wilson," he greeted, his voice soft and cultured. "We finally meet in person." Jack recognized the voice immediately. It was the man who had called his apartment, the one who had referred to the girls as government property. "The doctor, I presume," Jack replied, his throat dry and raw. The man inclined his head slightly. "Dr. Alexander Mercer, director of Project Mirror. I must admit I'm impressed. Infiltrating our facility was bold." "Where are my daughters?" Jack demanded, his muscles tensing against the restraints. Mercer raised an eyebrow. "Your daughters? An interesting choice of words. Are you referring to Subject E7 Original or its derivations, E7A and E7B? "Their names are Emma," Jack spat, rage building inside him. "And they are children, not test subjects." "And that is where our perspectives differ, Mr. Wilson," Mercer replied, sitting with studied elegance across from Jack. "What you see as inhuman experiments, I see as the next step in the evolution of our species, immortality within our grasp." "Immortality?" Jack repeated. "Creating children and experimenting on them offers immortality?" Mercer smiled faintly like a patient teacher before a stubborn student. "Allow me to explain the true scope of our work. Project Mirror is not simply about creating physical duplicates. That would be trivial, mere cloning. Our achievement was the transfer and bifurcation of consciousness." Jack remembered what the girls had said about the moment in the mirror, the point of divergence in their memories. "Imagine it," Mercer continued, his eyes gleaming with scientific fervor. "The ability to transfer a complete human mind, memories, personality, consciousness into a new body, or better yet, to split it among multiple bodies, creating living, breathing backups of oneself. Death would become a temporary inconvenience." "It's monstrous," Jack murmured, playing God with innocent children. "Children are ideal subjects," Mercer explained with cold practicality. "Their brains possess a plasticity and adaptability that adults have lost. Their identities are still forming, which facilitates bifurcation without the psychological trauma more developed minds would experience." Nausea rose in Jack's stomach. How many children have you done this to?" "Project Mirror has processed approximately 47 subjects over the last 5 years," Mercer stated with the indifference of someone reciting weather statistics. "Of those, 23 resulted in successful bifurcations with at least one viable duplicate." "And the others?" Jack asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Unfortunately, science advances through trial and error," Mercer replied evasively. "But every failure brought us closer to our current success. Your daughter, Emma, was our first perfectly stable triple bifurcation." "Triple?" The floor seemed to vanish beneath Jack's feet. But there are only two. Ah, Mercer smiled enigmatically. Then they haven't told you everything. Interesting. Before Jack could process this new revelation, the door hissed open again. A man in a military uniform entered, whispering something in Mercer's ear. The scientist's brow furrowed, visibly displeased. "It seems your accomplices have escaped with classified material," he reported, his tone now less complacent. "This complicates our situation considerably." A flicker of hope ignited within Jack. Robert and the girls had escaped with the evidence. If they could just reach Catherine in time. "Mr. Wilson," Mercer continued, leaning forward, "I'll be direct. We need to recover those documents and, more importantly, subjects E7A and E7B. Your cooperation would greatly facilitate this process." "And why would I help the monsters who kidnapped my daughter?" Jack retorted, his voice thick with contempt. "Because I can offer you something no one else can," Mercer replied, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The truth about what really happened to Emma Wilson on October 15th, 1999. Jack felt his heart stop. "What do you mean?" "The girls you met a few days ago," Mercer began, "those identical Emmas, they both believe they're your daughter because they have her memories. But there's something neither of them knows, something we've kept hidden, even from them." Mercer produced a tablet from his lab coat and placed it on the table. A video appeared on the screen. A hospital room. The date in the bottom corner read October 15th, 1999, the day Emma disappeared. "Your daughter was never kidnapped from the schoolyard, Mr. Wilson," Mercer said, as the video showed paramedics wheeling a young girl on a gurney into an emergency room. "She suffered a massive cerebral aneurysm during recess. She collapsed without warning. By the time she reached the hospital, she was already brain dead." Jack watched in horror. The images flickered past, doctors working frantically, machines hooked up to the small body, and finally the devastating moment they stopped trying to resuscitate her. He recognized the hospital. He remembered being notified of an accident at the school, remembered running desperately to the ER. But his memories after that point were a blur, fragmented and confused. "We told you and your ex-wife that Emma had passed away," Mercer continued as the video showed Jack collapsing in the waiting room. "And technically she had, but when we learned of her condition, we obtained authorization for an experimental procedure. Your ex-wife signed the papers. Sarah would never do that," Jack protested weakly, though he did recall her appearing briefly at the hospital before vanishing from their lives again. "Mrs. Wilson was quite susceptible to the promise of a second chance," Mercer replied coolly, "especially when offered substantial financial compensation and the guarantee that you would never know of her involvement." The video shifted to a laboratory where Emma's body, tethered to life support machines, was monitored by technicians. "Although the original brain was irreparably damaged, we managed to preserve the complete memory matrix," Mercer explained. "It was our first successful extraction and preservation of a consciousness. What we didn't anticipate was that upon reimplanting that matrix into cloned bodies, the consciousness would bifurcate. Instead of a simple transfer, we got 3 distinct Emmas, each one convinced she was the original." Jack felt the world crumbling around him. "You're lying. This is some kind of psychological manipulation." "Why would I lie?" Mercer countered with an air of genuine curiosity. "The truth is far more extraordinary. The original Emma Wilson died that day. The girls you met, they are, in a metaphysical sense, your daughter. They have her memories, her personality, even her identical neural patterns, but they are also something new, unprecedented." Jack struggled to breathe as the implications crashed down on him. If what Mercer said was true, then the original Emma really had died that day. And yet, The girls he'd met were as authentically Emma as anyone is authentically themselves, the sum of their memories, personality, and consciousness. "Where is the third one?" he finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. "E7C remains at our secondary facility," Mercer answered. "She developed variations that require special monitoring." "What kind of variations?" "Let's just say that enhanced cognitive abilities sometimes come with unexpected side effects," Mercer replied evasively. "But that's not relevant right now. What matters is that you understand what's at stake." Mercer switched off the tablet and leaned forward again, his gaze fixed intently on Jack. "Think about it, Mr. Wilson. If this information becomes public, what do you think will happen? The entire world will know that those girls are not, by current legal definitions, technically human. They'll be treated as anomalies, scientific curiosities, subjected to endless tests and examinations. Is that what you want for them?" A lump formed in Jack's throat. "What are you suggesting?" "A compromise," Mercer said softly. "Help us recover E7A and E7B. In return, we will allow you to keep one of them. You choose which Emma will be your daughter. We will provide you with new identities, relocation, and a guarantee that you will never be disturbed again. A real second chance for both of you." "And the other one?" Jack asked, already dreading the answer. "She will continue to contribute to the advancement of science," Mercer replied with calculated ambiguity, "along with E7C." Jack closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of the impossible choice before him. Could he really choose one Emma over the others, knowing he would be condemning them to a life of experimentation? Or should he risk everything to expose the truth, with no guarantee it would secure freedom or safety for any of them? "I need to see them," he said finally. "All of them, including the one you call E7C." Mercer seemed to consider the request. "That could be arranged, though E7C is at a different facility. But I must warn you, time is of the essence. Your accomplices have likely already contacted the authorities or the press. Once that happens, my options become severely limited." Jack looked directly into Mercer's eyes, searching for any glimmer of humanity in that clinically impassive face. "If you truly care about the future of your research, you will take me to see all of my daughters. Then, we can talk about compromises." A faint smile touched Mercer's lips. "Very well, Mr. Wilson. Consider it done." As the guards escorted him from the interrogation room, Jack felt the weight of all the truths and lies settling on his shoulders. But amid the confusion and the pain, a single crystalline certainty emerged. Regardless of their origin, regardless of how they came to be, the Emmas were real. Their fears, their hopes, their love, it was all real, and he would do anything to protect every single one of them.